Yeah, so thanks everybody for joining. Hey, I have to say this. Hope you enjoyed the boat trip again. You will hear this many times today. So today, the idea is that we talk about how to tech align, and have Andrea and Mario here, and I think best to leave themselves for a second. So what's previous experience? How do you work in your current company and so on? Just to give context, where do we come from in the discussion?
Yeah, I can start. Mario, I'm the data team, background, data science, innovation. So quite some previous experience in different contexts, also different team setups and team topologies. So yeah, looking forward.
My name is Andrea. I am the head of data at Casavo. I joined the company in October 2020 to build the data team who build the data infrastructure to running all the data activities. My background is in software engineering, but I moved to data back in 2013 with the early version of Spark. And now the team is growing and we are trying to make all the data products that Clara mentioned works at Casavo.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, so as I said, we're talking about how do tech and data align. In order to kind of to get a feeling of the room, I thought I'd start with a question. So this never works. Do you think that tech and data are perfectly aligned? Here, just raising. Who here thinks that tech and data are perfectly aligned? Okay, who here thinks there's room for improvement? Thank you very much. This is the response I was looking for. So we will organize today's session in kind of parts. So first we'll talk about the current setup. So basically we have tech as data producers, and then they just throw something over the fence and you have data trying to catch that, or rather go to the fence, cut the fence out, see what's there, then grab it and hope to organize it in the data platform. And then in the second part, we'll try to follow up on what Clara mentioned. So how can things look in the future if we have this data platform as a common parallel backend or a single backend to the tech organization? And finally, at the end, we will have some time for some questions. So let's start with the most common setup, what we have currently. So data as consumers and tech throwing big at us. So how does this work at your companies? Let's start with that.
Yeah, I mean at Evernest, it's actually not so much throwing over the fence, since we at least have some kind of we did some precautions in our architecture of the backend that already makes data kind of centralized. So we have something called a central data hub where all services changing data entities actually post updates to, and this will then funnel stuff through into the data warehouse, which is BigQuery in our case. So it's already kind of well structured. Luckily,
you managed to solve it nicely, and this is the advantage of having VP of engineering and data, everybody.
No, actually, that was already bootstrapped by the great people from Project A. So props to those.
How about at Casavo, Andrea?
Yeah, also Casavo is quite different from the traditional setup. Actually, we started with a central data team separated from product tribes. But 1 year ago, we decided to force the alignment by merging the data team within the product tribes. So now people with data skills are within the product tribes, even if after 6 months we decided to move them from the squad to a dedicated group within the tribe. In previous companies where I've been, instead we have a data team that just receive what the tech team produce. And there was a few issues, especially in the business understanding and then be close to what actually happened to deliver value to the customer, and was quite complex to move this knowledge to the data team. Because I prefer...
in what formats did they receive it back then?
No, because mostly they're consumed as analytics by product managers. So for some degrees they are received from to understand how the product works, but we didn't move the data back to the operational application. There was no use case.
So I can speak from my experience working with a bunch of our portfolio companies. We have seen a bunch of issues where the tech team doesn't care too much of the quality of the data, nor they, for example, they don't timestamp. They don't have and a problem. Kind of explain to them why is this important, because they don't know the analytics use case downstream. So how important the quality of the data is and how it is used downstream. So it's kind of one way to approach this would be to try to organize people in tech in having some workshops or just educating them. What are the consequences of the data that they are producing? However, big companies or startups that are becoming bigger, everybody tries to move really fast. They don't have the time to invest into data quality, so everybody has their own priorities. A bit of a organizational and people issue. So what do you think? How can one try to approach to fix this?
I think that here the role of product manager is really important, because in the end, if you consider a feature ready, even if it's not properly tracked, if the data that collect is not made available to who need to consume it, probably there is an issue in the concept of a complete feature. Something that we experience at Casavo is that product manager think first to what the front end offer, and later in a separate section to the data, and which is an error, because at the beginning you don't have the data to track the feature, and the data you can use to build something else is not available, and so on. So I think that also training product manager is very important. Also because even with data people within the tribes, it's not so easy to force the priority to this topic. So I will start from that.
Yeah, I would completely agree. So in that case, I guess you mean the product manager of the tech team, right? So because now we're talking about data team receiving stuff from the tech team. Yeah, it's really interesting because especially what you talked about in terms of data being produced, thinking about machine learning use cases where you're trying to train models with data produced by an application, and sometimes the kind of the difference between what is now feature engineering for the models and what is still application data is kind of blurry. So we've seen that in the past with a company I work with doing fraud detection. Some stuff we were using as features for ML models. We would like to modify them slightly from the data perspective, but the product team wouldn't modify it because they had other use cases depending on those fields. They couldn't change it. So that's also one of the examples where really needs kind of stakeholder management to work out how we can solve this and how we can disentangle this. But you need product managers with a certain mindset, because I agree, most of the times it's, okay, what can the end user see? And then you work back from there, or you don't even care how it works internally, but the more data gets important, the more you need to also think about this kind of stuff.
So absolutely product managers trained to think of this. But what do you think about just having the realization of the importance of data higher up in the company? Because usually product managers' incentives are shipping features fast. So kind of finding this balance between worry about data, then this will add on the time that you features as well. So how do you find this balance of doing two things in sync?
Well, I don't think to have an answer because there is one variable that usually makes everything related, most of the things related to data more complex to manage for product management, and it's not so easy to see the value, and it's the uncertainty of some developments. So telling a product manager that if you collect 6 months of data, probably in the future we were able to build an amazing machine learning powered project is something that doesn't fit very well with the idea of delivering value fast and with a rapid iteration. So the uncertainty is something that creates problems with some data projects. On some other, I think that is just a lack of culture. I spent countless hours dealing with the software developers that doesn't understand that now Snowflake can do something that a data warehouse wasn't able to do 5 years ago. And I lost in the discussion, so it's not so easy to convince them. But I hope that probably the data platform could help, and then the future will be easier.
The way we try to solve it at Avernus is, and it certainly helps to have a very kind of quantitative-minded head of product. So we try to, with my colleague from product, we try to have these constant conversations about how we also use data. And if you have someone from product who's, it's always good to start with the world of tracking, because that's usually what quantitative-minded product people know. And then it starts getting really easy to see what other data would be useful to generate and track, because that's something that product people can relate to. Okay, you know Google Analytics, you know maybe backend-based analytics tracking. So start the conversation from there, and then especially if you also have data-driven products, kind of natural, I think. But you need the right people who are up for this.
But even in companies where you have data-driven products, I guess a bunch of the tech setup is not dependent on the data-driven product module, let's say. So, and depending on how big the organization is, smaller organizations, I imagine that it's easier to manage this. But in larger organizations, you get into this trouble of people thinking in silos, like with everything else. What are your ideas? Like, how can one fix those kind of issues? So you have the data products team; they know what they're doing, and the people that are dependent on that part, they also kind of.
Okay, so now it's the other way around, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Very good question. Probably the best path to get an answer is to focus on the value we are able to deliver to our customer. If we found a way to deliver value, also tech people and product people will understand, even in a large organization, that you can benefit from focusing on data, and maybe is a good path. But I don't have a better answer.
Yeah, so I quite like this diagram from the talk before, where this sketch of the data platform. That was quite a technical diagram, so there's these different modules and whatnot. I would encourage looking at that from a team setup perspective, and I think the answer to your question is properly managing the data team's product portfolio. So, because for normal products, that also includes reliability, defining behaviors, defining interfaces and contracts. I think that's something that will certainly help, although it's trickier because no one's really done it before. So what is quality assurance for a stream of data that feeds some product feature? What is it really, right? I mean, is it guarantees on the distribution of a certain value of a field, or is it availability only? But I think the answer is going to go into that direction, that you have a product manager for the data team, and if stakeholders have issues and need improvements, they can talk to that person, and that person can also say no to a lot of stuff, like any other product manager can. If you come with crazy stuff where priorities are not clear. Yeah.
Yeah, so on the collaborations between product managers, I had recently in the past year work team lead of data engineering at CRI. There, the way that they're set up, that team of developers, 4 or 5, as a product manager, and they're set up in different parts of the tech organization. However, you have the analytics team, which was part of another, wasn't even in tech at that point of time. And then you have a product manager on the analytics team, or the lead was supposed to have that role, who is supposed to talk to the people in tech, the other product managers, kind of find and agree types of issues, but it was so difficult to make it work because the incentives from the people above the product managers weren't there to worry about data quality and so on. They were very much pressured on delivering the features that they were working on, and the chaos that was introduced in data. The issue there was also it was a smaller company, then it blew up. So yeah, hypergrowth does this, but the data in the source was so messy, and so many different systems were working on that messy data on the operational side. It was just, I don't know, super difficult to communicate to people to change things, because they needed to invest a lot of time into refactoring their own systems. And people that are under pressure to deliver features, they don't do that, especially if it does not bring value to the incentives of how their teams are judged on success. So it's a super difficult balance to find. So what are your thoughts about this? Like, if you come to such a situation, and I hope most of the companies do, maybe not on the tech chaotic side, but in the hyper growth side. So how can one approach those kind of problems?
I would say the most similar problem is building features versus reducing technical debt, which also always suffers in phases of hypergrowth, because it also doesn't create immediate business impact. But the difference is there, at least the engineers on the product team know that it's dangerous to keep it around for infinite time. So maybe what one would need is to kind of really give teams the mission to take care of that other stakeholders' technical debt, which they happen to produce. They are not directly measured on this in terms of product outcome, but maybe it's you really need to put this into the teams and say this is part of your mission, because it affects the company as a whole. We can't really technically disentangle it because data is produced by the code that you're maintaining. So I think you'd have to factor it into the mix of. You can't technically separate how it's.
Yeah, I agree with Mario. The idea is that you need to find a balance between what you choose to deliver directly and what you choose to invest for the future in terms of refactoring and also data activities. And I think that also what you said is really important, because the alignment around a shared objective for both tech and data, and also for business is really important. Otherwise, you have a diverging path that doesn't bring you to a stable situation.
What about, I mean, tooling is progressing a lot. So do you think that some of these new tools that are coming up, new technologies, you mentioned Snowflake, that it can be helpful in certain situations. Do you think that tooling can help in this alignment in any way?
I think that tooling could make easier to approach some issues requiring less investment and could definitely make shorter the distance between an idea and the value we are able to deliver. So I really hope that in now and in the future, tooling could help us in make tech and data closer. As I said before, Snowflake now is able to deliver some features that just 5 years ago require a complex setup. And I see similarities between what we are seeing in terms on Snowflake and the World Data Platform and what happened to Kubernetes a few years ago. Kubernetes is complex to set up, but once you have that, it's quite easy to deploy applications. So the same way building data product should be easier. So I see a lot of value in this trend.
I'm a bit skeptical actually because tooling normally makes it easier or empowers people to do the work without any additional engineers just taking care of the tooling, like it was back in the time when we were using Kafka or even earlier Hadoop. Basically, you need full-time people making sure the cluster works, basically, or nothing breaks at any given time. But I'm not sure about whether tooling will solve this alignment and mission and roles problem, because from my point of view, it's more of a people's topic and how you build the organization. Because, of course, engineers always have the instinct, oh, new tooling, let's jump on it. Then you build everything using the new tooling, and you might end up still not having solved these mental problems. I think come down to what is people's mission, what are the products of the data team, and vice versa. How do you do the stakeholder management in the two directions? And maybe the data team, maybe it's not special, it's not that special, because we always see like, oh, the data team, what is it? It's somehow there, it's super important, it's super central. Maybe it's another product team, just important. Every other product team is also very important. You may even be able to identify what the contributions to the company's success are. That would be nice. But maybe it's also time to not see the data team as so much special. Kind of became this because it started with data. Product teams are not the code teams. They are building products. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, data is special, don't worry. But I agree, I mean, and Clara touched upon this, so it should be seen as a profit center instead of a cost center, and this only happens once data becomes more of a product, or you start building products on the data platform that is supposed to come around. So let's switch focus on that. So what are your thoughts on whether, if this is possible, and I think that it's possible, especially with the new tooling that it's coming up, and then you have these databases that can support and have a lot of features to easily send data back to operational systems or even used in operational manner. So what do you think it's necessary for the data warehouse to become a data platform that is like a central place used for building products, but also sending back features to the operational teams?
Well, I would say that the starting point is a modern data stack, so something to ingest the data, storage, and something to consume it, dashboards or so on. And I would also add orchestration and governance as a service, by default, because they are a good starting point. But over that, largely depend from the use cases you have. So for some of them, this stack is enough. For some other, probably adding some more pieces is a good idea. It depends on the use case, in my opinion. But the starting point would be the modern data stack.
Yeah, I mean, on the technical level, sure. Again, now maybe boring already, but if you really take this diagram and say, okay, this is the products we offer on top of the data platform, other people can actually forget that there's a data platform underneath it, but we now have the ability to build a whole lot of products. If it's managed this way, I think it's great. If it's communicated, like now there's a data platform, anyone can ask those guys now to stuff with data, we're back in the old world. So really, that's why I'm always a bit allergic to this platform label. The platform sounds like, yeah. And if you look at tech, just the fact that we have Kubernetes clusters doesn't mean that anyone can come to the engineers and say, could you make a small app and put it into a pod on Kubernetes? Also just the infrastructure layer below it.
Yeah, I agree. So the main problem will be organizational. I mean, the tooling and having this central data platform should help because these new databases should be powerful enough, and we should have the tools that they can send data quickly anywhere you want, and you don't have to wait a day for your pipeline to run. And so on. So hopefully we get to that point. But the organizational part is something that definitely needs to change, and we saw it in the first part of the discussion. So how would one organize this? And Mario, you have like an example. Your company has data centrally in its product as well, but how does one organize the teams, the tech and data teams, so that they work in sync and they use this central backend, let's say?
Yeah, so I mean, at Evernest, we're only officially starting the data team right now. So it's always been so far like ad hoc collaborations of a small circle of people, which we use to build the whole reporting and analytics stack. So we're only at the point now where we started, but we really want to try this model that I'm trying to advertise. We'll define the data team as a team delivering products, and we will make sure that stakeholder management between the product team, the existing product teams, and that new team will go via, if not product managers, because we don't have any yet, but then at least following the principles of product management.
But it would help that you would be in charge of these teams, and then these product managers kind of report to you or report to somebody who will report to you.
It's not all me, right? I mean, I'm really thankful to the product organization at Evernest because that's, in my opinion, really strong, and that helps a lot. And the conversation between tech and product is really healthy and allows us to do this because we're basically all on the same page. No one's going, no, this is bullshit, don't do it. So in our current setup, maybe we're just lucky, but yeah. It's not like I have to advertise inside of the company, come on guys, let's do this in a product way, or let's take data seriously. That's a given.
Sometimes it helps to be lucky. Andrea, what about your case?
Now I think I understand why my opinion is quite different, because we already have a setup where data is very close to the product. We only have product tribes, and we suffer for the lack of someone who takes care of the technical infrastructure. So that infrastructure is managed by people in their free time. And this is a problem because we can't have a focus on building a stable infrastructure with blueprints, with easy to use blueprint to build anything. And this makes worse the relation between tech and data within the tribes, because data has some problems in doing their job. Instead, tech is very supportive. So to me, build the technological infrastructure, even with the platform team that takes care of it, is really important and make easier to solve the people problems. So probably we have different opinion on that because we have different setups.
It depends where you take off. Yeah.
Okay, good. So we need to slowly wrap up. Any final thoughts on today's discussion? To share any advice? End on a positive note, please. Be optimistic.
well, no matter what, listen to people. We didn't, and we made a mess.
Also, I mean, stay positive. Talk to your colleagues. Make clear that it's all for the common good, and don't get too nervous when Andreessen Horowitz puts out a new strategy paper that everything will now drastically change. That has happened many times, and somehow always manage to do reasonable things.
So talk to people, don't stress, things will work out. So we will stop here, but we do have time for some questions. So I give it back to the audience, if anybody has any questions.
I think yes. Data culture is something that really miss in most companies, and I think that product manager with this culture could be key in the change. It is not the only point, but is really important, and we know that.
I completely agree, and I would add that really look for a product manager, not a product owner, and look for someone who's been working with quantitative products or products that are at least monitored quantitatively, so they bring this mindset. That makes it a lot easier.
Somebody there first, give it up to you later. Nemanja.
Where it sits in the organization?
I have a strong opinion on that, I think that data is a tech stuff. I saw data teams under product, under finance. I disagree. I prefer to have them under tech because it's just tech competencies moved to a slightly different objective, but it's the same.
I would say it depends on who's steering that part of the company. Should sit under someone who's well aware of the importance impact that data can have on the company. Then it doesn't matter if it's operations, product, or tech. Rather depends on the mindset of the management.
Yeah, but in my opinion, also the org chart matters in terms of distance. So if you are under the same hat, again, it's easier to make them closer. Again,
That's
it's a
true.
strong opinion.
Yeah.
We can discuss.
Yeah, especially in bigger companies, the distance to the different teams really matters. So if things work well and the mindset is good, then it doesn't matter too much. But the idea, I guess, where to put the data team so that kind of manage damage, that you use the distance to the teams that you want to collaborate with matters. That's important in my opinion as well.
And then it gets really tricky, especially if we saw this example from accounting and financing, if they are also stakeholders, and then they are under the CFO. CFO that talks a lot to the other C-levels.
Absolutely. Someone. Andrea, I think this is where you...
Yeah, I also have a strong opinion on that. I really like the data mesh pattern, but not in terms of full implementation, just in terms of ownership. My opinion is that each tribe, each domain team, each streamline team should own also the data they produce and consume. And I also like the idea to have a platform team for the data infrastructure and a kind of enabler team to help a single team to adopt new stuff, because again, a single tribe could have issues in dealing with new blueprints and new ideas, and someone who's able to help you is a it's a good way to enter the world.
Do you want to chip in on the centralized, decentralized?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's also something we saw in the discussion round yesterday. We saw that crystallizing when people started asking about, okay, but what if we grow and become big, and maybe you have a hybrid model of a centralized team and then people in the individual teams who are representing data and analytics within these teams and can then talk in an easier way to the centralized. I think it will be more diverse because the organizations are more diverse, right? So, and
yeah, probably.
I think it will happen. I think the hypothesis is true.
Probably depends on the business. So some business probably benefit from a CTO from the data space, some others from the software engineering space. But I agree with Mario, in the future we will see more diversity.
Good news for everybody here, future CTOs. Do we have any other questions?
Well, it's a huge problem we have because
yeah, so the question was, how do you kind of build a data culture? How do you ensure that people have data in mind, the organization?
Well, it's a problem we have because, especially in real estate, the data quality is terrible. Comes from manual input from people, so it's something that we need to take care of. And the only idea that seems working is to try to show people the effect you can have, or the benefit you can have from high quality data compared to what you have on low quality data. So giving them value for customers or internal users is the only way to onboard them, because you can train them, you can ask them to insert better quality data, but if they don't have incentives, they need to deal with different objectives. Maybe insert more data, but to lower quality means for them to have a bigger incentive in terms of deals or so on. Instead, giving them value, maybe something that let them move faster or understand better the market is the only way that I see working.
I completely agree. Show them stuff. Yeah. Show them data-driven products. Show them dashboards even. I mean, we had some bashing for dashboards. It's not maybe the whole future, it's not dashboards, but what we saw at Evernest, we have a whole sales organization with real estate agents, and we use dashboarding to coach people from the individual level to the team level to the branch level to the country level. And when we made the switch from the first iteration, which was basically Excel, to BigQuery and Google Data Studio, people were just amazed by what they could now see and use. And I think that's the most, or the strongest effect transported, really almost on an emotional level, to show people what great things you can do.
Please, Annik. Did you hear that? So the question was with the how would the role of the data engineer change in terms of placement? So when moving in this direction of the data platform, whether the data engineers would sit in the data team or go to a platform team, how would one organize that part?
Well, I see them in both, according to what the Streamline team should do. So if the mission of the Streamline team is to build some use cases that require data engineering skills, probably the product team or the Streamline team is a good choice for data engineers. But obviously, we also need them to build the infrastructure in the data platform team. So according to the use case, the size of the company, the maturity, you can have different options.
Yeah, and I think what that really means is that I was never a data engineer. From my point of view, it's always been far too much tied to a certain tech stack that these engineers are using. I would say in the end, they are also engineers. And the special skills you needed for that, not too many, I would say. So they will be everywhere because they are engineers, in my opinion.
Yeah, so the differentiation between data engineer and software engineer will kind of vanish more and more. Software engineering people will need to learn data stuff because it's important, and data engineers will have to learn even more software engineering best practices.
Yeah, and that's not a problem at all, because what I've seen in like 3 companies now, everyone's interested in it. So you don't need to force the normal engineers interested in data topics. I would say because you do data engineering, you're also writing software, and data will become an inherent part of any modern application. So at least if you consider yourself full stack, then it's just going to be another aspect of developing applications. So I would say it's converging. Not so special anymore because the world has moved on and it's become very typical for, I don't know, data pipelines and transformations to be part of what you're building. Definitely. I mean, it depends, it's a bit philosophical. It depends what you consider as software. If you say a web application is prototypical of software, then of course a Spark job is completely different because it's doing something completely different. But if software is just code being executed, then it's all kind of the same. I wouldn't agree. Because there's software without databases, right?
Do we have a last question? Oh, right on time. Then, so thank you once again for your attention, and thanks to the panelists.